Hey, how you doing? Now, since my arm isn't healed yet and I can't pick up my accordion, I thought I'd go back and review some previous videos, and I found one in particular that had quite a few mistakes in it and some sloppy playing, and that was number 6A. What happened was, at the time, the arthritis in my hands was stinging me pretty bad, and I hit wrong buttons on the accordion, so I wanted to go over those chords and scales that I talked about and clarify some things, make them perfectly clear. I just hate to do sloppy videos, but I'm always uncomfortable because after 65 years I have this tattered body and it just doesn't seem to want to work right. So one of the chords I featured was G minor 7. And to play that on the accordion, okay, I showed you that there's pretty much, it's pretty simple, but there's two different ways to do it. Now here's the G minor 7, and you use the F bass button and then the G minor chord button. See, here's your counter bass rank, your bass rank, major chord button rank, and your minor chord button rank. And then the other way I showed you was with the G counter bass and the B flat major chord button. You get the same thing, but in this case we're featuring the F in the bass, and in this case we're featuring the G in the bass. So let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. You see, in the one version you're playing an F bass and a G minor chord button. So here's your G minor chord tones. And in the other example, you have a G bass, and then you have your B flat chord tones, which would be B flat, D, F. So two different ways of playing it, and one stresses the bass, that's F, and the other stresses the bass, that's G. But in both these chords, as you play them, as I've shown you, the fifth in this chord is not missing, and that makes a nice sound, makes a nice full sound. So I wanted to review that because I didn't speak well in that video, and I didn't play well. Now the other chord that I featured, or tried to feature, was the F sharp major 7, and I played it with an F sharp counter bass and a B flat minor chord button. But because of the pain in my hands, I kept hitting the wrong button. I would play the F sharp counter bass, but accidentally hit the E flat minor button. Okay, now in the description box below the video, I made it a point to tell you that don't worry about that because it works out okay, and I'll show you why. That mistake is acceptable, but it only happened because my hands were sore. But here you have your F sharp major 7, your actual chord here, and then here you have what would be the boo-boo chord, would be an E flat minor with an F sharp bass, or you could call that an E flat minor with a G flat bass, because that's the proper tones it would be in the E flat minor scale. So there you can look at that. You can stop your video if you want to write it down, but that's what I was trying to say, and I didn't say it well, and I apologize for that. So today is cleanup day. Now, if you look at that F sharp major 7 chord, I told you how to play it. I said, well, why don't you just go ahead and play an F sharp bass with the B flat minor chord button, and these are the tones. But in essence, in reality, in the true F sharp minor 7 chord, the tones would be named A sharp, C sharp, and E sharp. Oh, I hope I'm saying this right. And in this case, in this chord, the fifth is not missing. That is a full F sharp major 7. Now the boo-boo chord, the one I played wrongly, okay, that would have been an E flat minor with an F sharp bass. So here's your F sharp bass, And the chord tones, chord button tones would be E flat, G flat, and B flat. But in essence, in reality, in line with the F sharp scale, you'd actually have a D sharp, an F sharp, and an A sharp. That would be the proper notation if you're writing it on music notation paper, if you're writing it out. So I wanted to show you that, make that perfectly clear. The correct chord that I tried to feature, the mistake chord, which is totally cool. I play it anyway. I like it. I like them both. But there it is. And that should be very, very clear now. I feel better about that. Now, I showed a chord that you can play for fun, just for fun, over the F major chord. Excuse me, I showed you a scale that you can play over the F major chord. And I call that, in my system, the harmonic minor 2 scale. That's what I call it. And I call it that because if you look at the name of my channel here at YouTube, it's called Scalephrase. And that comes from my scalephrase system, which I haven't talked about yet. I might save it for last. That's a system I use to make scales and to study, analyze, play. So that's where I got my name, Scalephrase. But the point is, if you can be patient, if you actually like these videos, I'm going to be showing you almost all the stuff that's in my book, and you might find it useful. You might find it helpful, and you don't have to pay. That's the whole idea. I want to give a whole lot more than I take. That's my my goal. So for the F major chord, I showed my harmonic minor 2 scale, but I also wanted to tell you that traditionally that scale would be called or referred to as the Phrygian dominant, Phrygian dominant, or the Spanish gypsy scale, and there's other names. There's a whole bunch of names, but it's a bunch of crap. That's why I cleaned it up. That's why I invented the Scalephrase system, to clean it all up. Everything's clean. There's no messy scales, no messy names. Now, this scale is called harmonic minor 2 scale because it has a harmonic scale phrase. That's a catchword for me, Scalephrase. That's a 4-tone group. That's a group of 4 tones. And then there's a minor 2 scale phrase. That's a group of 4 more tones. And these scale phrases are determined by the half steps that are in between the tones. There's specific half steps between there, which identifies that as a harmonic or a minor 2 scale phrase. So I wanted to go over that again and make that perfectly clear. That's a scale I showed that you can play over the F major chord button. Then I showed a scale that you can play over the F sharp major 7 chord. Alright, and that scale, I call it the minor 2. That's in the Scalephrase system. That's not traditional. The traditional names, just 2 for example, would be the Phrygian scale or Phrygian mode, and there's other names. It's just a mess. And I call it that because you have 2 minor 2 scale phrases. Minor 2 scale phrase because of the half steps, another minor 2 scale phrase because of the half steps. And I'm not going to get into that now. I'm just trying to show you clearly what I didn't present clearly in that video 6A. And that's about it. I don't want to go on and on and on, but if you go back and take what I told you today, you'll understand the other video better, I hope, and recognize quickly which scale and chord can go together and why. That's the whole idea. And I'd like to get back as soon as I can and finish my tone lining. That would be video 1C, and wrap it up. I had some philosophical things to go with the first 2 videos, 1A and 1B, and then maybe, I keep promising, maybe I'll get into my last 2 systems and try to give you as much free stuff as possible. That's my goal. So thank you for being patient again, and I hope to see you soon. Good night.